Post-edit, Jesse Starcher coming at you here. This episode is the final installment of Benjamin J. Colon and myself covering Spider-Verse. And we get right into the conversation and pick up where we left off. So if you haven't had the opportunity to check out the previous episode, make sure to go back into the archive, find it, and give it a listen, because we waste no time hopping right into the story on this episode. So I hope you all enjoy our final discussion on Spider-Verse. That synopsis is coming up, but first let me talk about Amazon Music. If you're looking for a good platform that can fill those musical needs, Amazon Music has you covered. If you head to getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network, you can get a free 30-day trial where you can check out over 70 million songs. That's getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network for that free 30-day trial. So when Pete is finally able to decipher the scroll Spider-Woman sent him, thanks to the 616 Spider-Girl, which is Anya Corazon, if I remember correctly. Yep. Anya, yep. He reads of the prophecy of the inheritor's downfall at the hands of a spider. And I think he says it's supposed to be happening like in 100 years. So this explains the inheritor's ultimate goal: to use the blood of the bride, Silk, the blood of the other, Cain, and blood of the scion, Benji, for a ritual to end any more spiders being created throughout the web of life and destiny. This ensures no spiders will be around to challenge the inheritors in the coming century. In a series of events, Cain faces off with Solus on Loomworld and, kills him pretty easily. Solus, this big badass, nice. There's a fight, but Cain turns into this massive mutant spider and just kills him outright. But Morland's able to kill Cain in the process. I put kill in quotes there, giving the inheritors the blood of the other. Also, unbeknownst to Pete and the rest of the crew, Silk and Spider-Gwen decide to head to Loomworld to try to rescue Spider-Woman and eliminate the ways for the inheritors to travel realities. However, Verna, Bora, and Brix find them and capture Silk, giving the inheritors now the final piece of the ritual, the bride. Soon after, Pete discovers Silk is left, believing that she just delivered herself to the enemy. He gathers his forces to take the battle to Loomworld to fight the inheritors. When they happen upon the inheritors mid-ritual, they are able to stop Deimos from drawing the blood of the scion, baby Ben Parker. During the fight, Uncle Ben escapes through a portal just as the inheritor outcast Karn arrives from another to help the spider army. When Deimos takes another stab at baby Ben, it's my favorite moment of this book.
Oh, yeah.
Out of the blanket jumps a very naked Spider-Ham. It's revealed Ben Parker, Spider-Man, who everybody thought ducked out of the fight. It's revealed that Ben Parker, Spider-Man, took baby Ben back to his own world, that of Mayday Parker's. Just then, Miguel O'Hara and Lady Spider appear with the repaired giant robot of Leopardon, however you're going to say that. As the battle intensifies, to the horror of everyone, Superior Spider-Man, Spock, if you will, goes off script and kills the Master Weaver, like straight up just myrtleizes him. Incensed, Morland attacks Pete and has him nearly beaten, sucking his life force out of him. In a desperate move, Pete opens a portal into the radiated apocalyptic world. As the two land hard on the ground, Morland is petrified to realize where they are. Pete then tells Morland where the bunker is and that if he wants to survive, he needs to run and find the shelter because Pete is leaving him there. As the battle winds down, the spider army rounds up the rest of the inheritors and drops them in the same reality as Morland. With the war over, Pete and the rest of the spiders rest to heal their wounds. So that is the rest of this story, the finale, if you will, of Spider-Verse. So I already said what my favorite part of this whole book is, and that is Spider-Ham pretending to be baby Ben Parker. And I think there may even be a pig in the blanket joke at some point in there.
Peter makes it because he has to be the one to make it.
It's so good.
You got fooled by a pig in a blanket.
So good. So don't get me wrong, this story had so much weight to it. There was a lot of weight to it. And there's a lot of things that happen in this final two issues. You know, I do not want to step on any toes here. So you bring your notes forth, sir. What do you have to say about the final two issues? And
as far as the Spider-Ham scene, like that's just great. That's just a lot of fun. I've talked a lot about, the things about Dan Slott's writing that rub me the wrong way. But one thing is, that I will say is that, Slott tries to keep that balance between the heavy-handedness and the heavy storytelling, and a lot of lightheartedness, and that's why Spider-Ham got pulled in, and also because he's just a part of Spider-Man history that you just couldn't ignore if you tried.
Oh, no way!
I think a lot of people would have been very upset if he wasn't in the story, and if he wasn't as big a part of the story as he was. But it's the same thing, like Guardians of the Galaxy, like the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Nobody was convinced that that anybody would have any kind of emotional attachment to a gun-toting talking raccoon and an 8-foot-tall talking tree.
Yeah.
And it turns out, if you're a good enough writer, if you can tell a good enough story, you can make somebody care about just about anything.
That's the truth.
And the thing is, if you can make them care, you can make them care about anything. You can make them care about, you can make them care about a cartoon pig. You can make them care about, a Japanese, mecha. You can make them care about, a Spider-Man that has 6 arms. Mm-hmm. You can make them care about clones. You can make them care about, secret agents, about pirates, about, all kinds of off-the-wall shit that happened in this story and all the things around it. It's all just character. And my friend and yours, Sean Comer, God bless him, he brings this up repeatedly because I've told him on more than one occasion. There's no bad characters, just bad writers or writers that write characters badly. If you're good enough, you can make your reader care about just about anything. You just got to find that thing. And we're professional wrestling fans, and the same thing goes for stuff like that. A gimmick can be crap, and if you're good enough, if you're a good enough performer and you've got a good enough story backing you, you can still make people care. Spider-Ham was a ridiculous conceit, and it was a ridiculous concept. It was based on a ridiculous comic book in the 80s, but you know what? That scene spoke to a lot of people, not just you and me. Trust me, I was online when this series came out. There were a lot of people that scene was like a big stand up and cheer type moment.
Nice, very nice.
It was because, first of all, Spider-Ham had a little bit of that cred from the 80s, but also because he was treated not as a complete joke in this story.
That's right.
The idea of having a cartoon pig as, one of the alternate universe Spider-Mans, that's inherently ridiculous. The thing is, you don't live in that ridiculousness all the time. You acknowledge it and you get past it and you move on with the story, and now he's a part of the story. That is one thing that Slott did that was very good, and that's what allowed for this reveal to be as awesome and ridiculous and awesome and ridiculous back and forth as it was. He's throwing a lot of stuff at you at the end of the story. This final part of the story was a little bit more rushed than it probably should have been. They could have gotten at least one more part out of this.
I agree.
Let it breathe a little bit more.
I agree.
But the reveal, like, you at first think that older Ben Parker was gonna cop out and give up again, but it turned out he was actually saving the baby's life, which was a cool reveal.
Oh, man!
He fled back to Mayday's universe and ended up saving her brother after all the. Once again, this might have been benefited from that exchange and that story that Friends and DeFalco had made in the Spider-Verse issue. That might have benefited from being in the main Amazing Spider-Man series, even if it was a backup story, a side story. It would have benefited from that because that was a story that probably should have been read by more people and seen by more people. It was important. It had more bearing on what came after it, because then that makes it all the more impactful when you see, you first think that, the old man copped out on everybody and the old man ducked out to save his own life, and it turned out he ended up doing the heroic thing and saving the baby, and executing the plan when it mattered the most, and which was something that Mayday didn't think he was capable of doing. It probably didn't even occur to her. And
I assume it happens in the epilogues, which I didn't do a synopsis for those, but I love how that story kind of wraps up with the fact that he decides to live in the Mayday Parker universe along with Mary Jane, Mayday, and baby Ben. You got to think that is a great way to kind of send that universe off. Now Mayday has a grandfather that, as far as she knew, was, well, I mean, he was dead. I assume her father got killed.
Yeah,
Deimos killed her father. So
yeah, they mentioned that because you're meant to believe that everybody died in when May fled with her brother.
Okay.
But MJ ended up living. I think her boyfriend in that series ended up living. Peter didn't make it out alive, but he sacrificed himself to save them.
Okay, all right, but yeah, it's cool to see that family kind of come together, and Ben decide to stay there to kind of be a grandfather to Mayday and her brother, and I loved it.
There's also May in the final part of the Spider-Verse proper. There's this whole throughout the entire story. There's this whole thing where not only am I going to get my brother back, but I'm getting revenge on the.
Oh, she's planning on killing.
She's dead set on finding Deimos and killing him.
Yeah.
And at the very end, not only does she not kill him, they find out Genix actually kind of distills Solus's essence into a crystal, and he says eventually we could clone him. We can always clone him another body and put his consciousness into another body as long as we have this crystal. Mayday at some point during that final battle ends up getting a hold of that crystal, and she's torturing him with it. She's threatening to smash the crystal, and Peter has told her previously and kind of reiterates we're heroes and we don't do that. Spider-Man's no one has to die morality kind of gets controversial from time to time. Mm-hmm. I think in this story it comes from a place of his own moral code, but it's also kind of practical in that he also says in the story we've already tried to kill the Inheritors and it doesn't work. So how about we find a better way to do it, which is smart, which is a little bit better than just the fact of we're not going to kill anybody because I said so, even though that's what it boils down to more often than not, even in this story. Mm-hmm. But he kind of has enough faith in May to kind of say I know you'll make the right decision in the end.
Yeah. That
also runs through a lot of these other Spider characters that he hasn't had a whole lot of interaction with. This part begins with Peter, 616 Peter and all of his crew crashing, Loom World. And Gwen Stacy and Jessica Drew and Silk are already there, and they're already fighting all of these Inheritors and their lackeys. Peter immediately goes to Gwen because there's this underlying thing where he first discovers that Gwen Stacy is a Spider-Woman from an alternate universe, and he feels a little bit almost like a older brother or parents.
Yeah, it's very
protectiveness. Mm-hmm. And they have a bond when it comes to that. He's very protective of her, but at the end he's about to go after all of these Green Goblins that are attacking her. Vera has the mutant Green Goblins that are her hounds.
Yeah,
they're attacking Gwen, and he immediately goes after them, and she's like, no, I can save myself. And he's like, all right, if she says she's got it, then she's got it. And she's got it. She ends up kicking their ass, and that's pretty cool. There's some growth there, but for both of them. That's another thing. Peter's arc in this story as finding out, not just becoming a leader, but kind of understanding what that means. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that means you got to let your troops do what they do. You can't fight every battle for your soldiers. You know what I mean?
He steps up big time throughout the series. that was one of the things that had to happen with a story arc like this. What is going to change for our main character? And with Pete, I mean, it's kind of on the nose, and I think it happens in the more in the epilogues. You kind of get a better sense of what kind of ramifications this had on Peter. But clearly his confidence begins to grow. It's starting. He's a little bit more sure of himself.
Oh, yeah.
This whole experience that he's gone through, leading this army of spiders, pretty much, trying to take care of the threat of Deimos, the threat of Morlun, the threat of the Inheritors. It's helped him grow as a person to where now he can be more confident in what he's going to do from this point forward. Yeah, I think the whole story itself definitely had an impact on the character, which is what we needed. I didn't want this just to be something where, okay, Spider-Man and a bunch of Spider-Man get together and they fight somebody and that's the end. That would have been real easy to do, but make it matter. And it mattered, I think. So.
Yeah, and you also get, of course, the only way this could have ended was, Spider-Man one-on-one facing Morlun, head to head. And the battle they have is pretty good. Morlun comes very close to killing him.
Yep.
And Spider-Man just has that one ace up his sleeve where he teleports them both into the nuclear fallout. I'll say this. This also pops up actually in Spider-Verse Team Up, that deals with, Karn's backstory. And I'll quote this. In the Spider-Verse Team Up issue, a bunch of these spider characters confront Karn, and they actually try to get him to join their cause and join their side because he is the outcast and he might be able to help them kind of turn the tide against his family. They mention something that's written in the scrolls about him, and the quote is, I wrote it down to you. According to the scroll, you wanted to explore their beauty, referring to the multiverse. You wanted to explore their beauty, record it, not bring death and destruction. If you know anything about Dan Slott, Dan Slott is a very, very, very big Doctor Who fan.
Okay.
If you've ever read his Silver Surfer run is basically Doctor Who.
I have wanted. Is it Silver Surfer Black? Is that what it's called?
That's what came immediately after. He wrote a very solid Silver Surfer arc of multiple years that was very much in the spirit of Doctor Who.
Yeah, he had a companion and everything in that,
right?
Yeah,
all of that. Yep.
Yeah, and I've heard of what
there were wacky planets and wacky aliens and life lessons, and it was all some of the best writing Slott has ever done. He's a big time Doctor Who fan.
Love it.
This seems like it's a reference to that. What's also a reference to that is if you know anything about Doctor Who. Doctor Who is the Doctor in Doctor Who is a character who is very against killing enemies directly.
Oh yeah.
But is not above enemies allowing enemies to destroy themselves through their own arrogance or through their own hubris or their own sort of villainy. And that's kind of what happens here with Spider-Man and Morlun. He basically teleports them into the radioactive fallout, and eventually, the other Spider characters dump him into that universe as well. And he tells them, like, you don't have to die, but there's only one way for you to live. There's only one way for you to survive. There's a fallout shelter, and we've marked, the directions to get there. So if you want to live, if you want to survive this, the radiation is going to kill you. If you want to survive, I'd suggest you start running.
Get going. You need to
And then he just breaks out from there, and then, like, that's all he leaves them with. He's like, and we find out in the epilogue, like, they won't die from starvation. There's animals they can feed on. It's all like radioactive spiders.
Yeah, they're big mutant spiders.
Which is some great poetic justice right there, man. If you really think about it, like they trap them on an irradiated dimension and the only thing they have to feed on is some mutant spiders.
The way those pages are drawn, they're all eating these spiders. They have these tiny little, they're oversized spiders in their hands, but their faces, they just look like
so disgusted. They just look so disgusted.
Like, oh, I can't believe we gotta do this, but there's plenty there to eat. It's just not going to taste great.
Well played, Peter Parker. That was some uncharacteristically ruthless tactics right there,
devious.
Man. He didn't kill him.
He did not.
He just gave him some very limited options for living, which is okay. All right. So that arc wraps up. Mayday deciding not to go the path of, killing. She basically, like, the crystal that had, like, Solus's essence, she also chucks that into the radioactive wasteland for Deimos to go chase after. So there's slight mercy going on over there, but there's not a whole lot. A little right before that, Deimos tries to thank her for, like, sparing his father's essence, and she's like, I didn't do it for you.
Yeah, she's very intent on vengeance, and then at the very end, she decides not to do it because she decides to do the right thing for herself, and that's important. When you are able to do that right thing, it clearly means a lot to her that she doesn't succumb to wanting vengeance against this person. So one of the things I want to give you the floor for is Superior Spider-Man Bach going all red wedding all over Master Weaver. But I didn't see that happening, and neither did anybody during the battle. Like, everybody was like, whoa, wait a second.
I kind of expected something like that. I expected the heel turn at some point.
Swerve, bro.
At some point, I knew he was going to turn on everybody because, at the end of the day, he was gonna try to save his own life. Mm-hmm. And the minute he found out earlier on that, like, oh, wait a minute, this Peter Parker that I've been interacting with, is not from my past, he's from my future, which means I'm not going to be Peter Parker forever. At some point, this guy is going to reclaim his identity and his body.
His realization that he's going to lose, he's just looking for any way to avoid it. And of course, the one thing that he lands on to try to avoid this ever happening is like, well, I'll just take out the dude that controls the whole web of life and destiny.
Slits his throat, man.
Won't have to worry about that now. Take that, Destiny. There you go.
Although it does also lead to, like, after he finds that out, it leads to one of the better moments in the whole series where he actually gives, like, the, get up and fight speech to old man Ben Parker. That's pretty great. Like, the speech he gives is pretty great because it's very much Otto Octavius speaking. He's like, I've lost countless battles, and I always get back up and try again. It's weird to see to hear a pep talk from the point of view of a supervillain.
No kidding.
But it's a great twist of that type of get up and fight type of rallying thing, and it works. It works so well because, like, from the most unlikely source, it works. It works very well. It ends up working for Ben Parker because it gets him going and it gets him motivated to put on the costume and join the fight, which is great. But yeah, like, Octavius kind of loses his mind at the end, or, maybe not even loses his mind. He becomes a little bit more like himself than he had been for a long time previously, which is, when all else fails, he falls back on, self-preservation.
Okay, now by the end of this story, something happens where he gets transported back to the correct time, and Peter
drop kicks him into a portal. That's what happened.
He has no memory, or he loses the memory of what happened. Does it come back at all, this experience that he had? They don't explore that anymore. Do they just wipe this experience away from him, or does that come back at all that you know of?
Not really, because once again, Spock is transported back to an earlier period in the comic. So he's transported back to a point in time that we've already seen in the comics. It's more like, the way Superior Spider-Man ultimately ends is, the city is under attack by the Green Goblin. Everything that Octavius has done to try to stop him has failed, and he has absolutely no recourse but to kind of, like, release Peter's body, Peter's consciousness back into his body, and kind concede, and he literally tells him at the end before like kind of fading away, he's like, I finally realized you are the superior Spider-Man. He has a contingency plan for all of that we find out later on.
Okay.
It involves clones. You want me to give it away, right? You want me to just come out and say it?
Oh, tell me all about it.
He cloned another Peter Parker body that he put his consciousness into.
I'm very surprised.
Yeah. No, you're not.
Well,
I didn't read what led up to it. There's a whole arc after Spider-Verse called the Clone Conspiracy, where we find out, Octavius had the contingency plan to put his consciousness in. And he had been growing another Peter Parker clone the whole time, and he had it as a backup plan. And if you notice, there's one panel where after Peter knocks him on his ass, and before he kicks him into the portal, sending him back in time, he kind of relays to his computer, execute plan, I forget what it was.
That's right. Yeah, he looks at
hibernation for like 100 days.
Yes.
That's what that is.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, I knew that was setting up something. That's why I was smart.
Once again, say what you will about Dan Slott, he can tell he can set up a long-term story.
Yeah, I'm all right with that. He
can definitely set up a story where something will come up and you'll have to go back like 5 years to find the shit that he planted the seeds of in advance, and it's like, what? Really?
That's good. That's good stuff. That's good writing.
Yeah.
Like it.
No, like I said, it's a very love-hate relationship I have with this particular writer.
What else you got there?
Just Karn's redemption, I guess you call it. We find out that the Master Weaver is actually a future past, I forget.
Oh, wibbly wobbly timey wimey.
Future or past version of Karn himself. Mm-hmm. So present day Karn actually ends up taking up the mantle of the Master Weaver, because apparently there has to be one at all times. Anybody can take the place. At one point, Silk volunteers to take to take his place. That doesn't, Karn decides maybe this is the only way that I can redeem myself, and he takes up that identity again, basically kind of closing this weird time loop that he's created for himself. Mm-hmm. It's a good reveal, because at first, because you hadn't seen his face up until that point under the big mask or big diving bell that he had been underneath through this entire series. When you take the Master Weaver's helmet off, which, by the way, it's a very subtle Steve Ditko, homage, I guess you call it. Steve Ditko was very big on having, reveals of villains as being people that you had never seen before, and it's just, he did that once or twice where it's like, the big reveal is that this villain is this guy that had never been seen before in any comic book previously, because sometimes that's just how it is. Sometimes the reveal is that the bad guy is somebody you've never seen before.
Okay, all right.
That's kind of his, the way he played it. This was a play on that, where when you first take off when they first take off the helmet for the Master Weaver, it's somebody that you've never seen before, until Karn takes off his helmet and it turns out that it's him.
Same guy.
That's pretty good. That was well played. I like that. Mm-hmm. And he decides, okay, well, this is, the only way that I'm going to get, any kind of redemption back.
What else you got there? Anything else on the final two?
This was another misstep, and it was another drop ball. If you read everything in chronological order by the checklist, this becomes a lot more obvious. Silk apparently got abducted off panel in between part 6 of Spider-Verse and where they last appeared, which is Spider-Woman number 3. Mm-hmm. Which I'm like, that's just weak.
I'm trying to think of what happened.
The Spider-Woman number 3 literally ends with Spider-Gwen, Silk, and Jessica Drew about to fight pirates.
Okay.
That is the last panel of that issue. That issue goes directly into Amazing Spider-Man 14, which is the last part of Spider-Verse. and immediately we find out Silk got abducted somehow.
That is weird.
There wasn't a tie-in, there wasn't a side story, there wasn't a blurb, there wasn't anything like that.
Wow, I completely missed that. Wow. Well,
that's weak sauce, man.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, you've got these other issues to tell that story. That's why they're out there. I mean, if not in this main thing, just like you said, either mention it or say, please see issue yada yada yada.
There's plenty of that to go around too. By the way,
oh my gosh,
there's asterisks out the ass in this.
No kidding.
Of every side issue and every side, which is why I mentioned earlier, it's a very different experience. When I first read this, I only read the main Amazing Spider-Man issues. I didn't read any of the side stories. Now, this time I actually read the side stories, and I'm like, oh, okay. That was important. That was probably important enough to include in the main story, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think they're even poking fun at themselves. I mean, you could tell, like, I think it was issue 2 where everybody splits off, asterisk, go check them out in this, go check them out in that. And then, the third and final one is like, go check out Spider-Man 2099. Do you see a trend here?
Yeah.
You're splitting the party up, and we understand we're going into a different series. So
the other thing I'll say, just personally for me, like to my kind of slight disappointment, Miles Morales was a little more underused than I remember him being in this story.
Aside from being, and I don't want to call him comedic relief, but there isn't a whole lot of seriousness going on in the stuff that he's focused on.
No, that's fair. He plays his part. He kind of rallies some of the troops. Whether or not the troops that he rallies makes any gigantic bit of difference in this story is kind of up for debate.
Yeah. I mean, really, you look at it, the ultimate Black Widow, she a lot more weight in the story that she was in.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that.
But
I think Miles definitely could have been used better in the story, especially since he was a very hot character at the time. The only thing I can think of is, and I guess we're talking a little bit about the epilogue now, as every different Spider character is kind of dispersing into their own separate universe, we hear about, everybody's going to their own separate ways. The Master Weaver, Karn, after he, present day Karn, after he assumes the Master Weaver identity, he starts saying, a couple of you are needed in your own dimensions right now. Something's going on.
Yes.
They're talking about Secret Wars.
Yep. Yeah.
They're talking about the 2015 or 2016 Secret Wars.
I remember Spider UK. That's the reason why he sticks around, because he tries to go back to his own world and it's completely gone. And he mentions the incursions, which I know is what leads up to Secret Wars. So I knew we were just getting on the precipice of that happening.
Yeah, that's what that is. And the thing about that is, I read Secret Wars. I read enough of that. It's an okay story. It's a very confusing story because it deals with multiverse stuff even more than this does, and it deals with it for the entire Marvel universe, and it deals with very specific multiverses, not sort of all of these all-encompassing, different universes.
Yeah.
It deals with very specific, alternate universes, and one of them is the Ultimate Universe.
Yep.
I joke now, knowing what I know now and knowing what I've seen now and what I've read, I joke, but it's not really that much of a joke. That Secret Wars series was the most elaborate, expensive, and convoluted way to get Miles Morales in the 616 universe.
Yeah.
Because that is the only lasting effect I can see that happened from that. Miles Morales plays a much bigger role in Secret Wars than he does in Spider-Verse.
Oh, yeah.
He's a big part of Secret Wars.
Yeah, I remember. But yeah, I'll agree with you. It seems like Miles was terribly underutilized, especially for a Spider-Man crossover. That's, my goodness.
Especially
why not?
For a 21st century Spider-Man crossover.
No kidding.
And also, just considering Miles was obviously the main character in Into the Spider-Verse. To that movie's benefit, that did more to bring Miles Morales as a character into the pop culture than anything else.
100%.
And I adore that movie largely for that.
Yeah.
That has given me an avenue to introduce, not so much introduce, but kind of like reintroduce a whole other generation to Spider-Man. I work in a place where my job involves me working with younger kids. Mm-hmm. And, we do like a movie night from time to time. I remember one time the movie night was Into the Spider-Verse. Oh. And I definitely sat in on that. I don't sit in on every movie that we watch, that we screen for the kids. But I made it a point to sit in on that one. And the kids were just hanging on every moment of that movie. And I could not have been happier.
Yeah, it's so good to watch the kids enjoy things like that. Yeah, dude.
Just seeing how many kids just, gravitated towards Miles as a character. It meant a lot. It meant a lot to me as a Spider-Man fan. It meant a lot to me as somebody who has championed Miles Morales as a character since the beginning.
For sure.
It was great. Spider-Verse, I won't say it did him a disservice. I'd say the service that it did Miles was pretty neutral. Mm-hmm. It didn't damage his character in any way.
I agree 100%.
I won't go so far as to say it damaged his character or anything like that. It's just, he was kind of like, shuffled off to the side a little bit. He had his moments in, the little Spider-Man, Spider-Verse team up issue. He got to interact with the 60s Spider-Man. That was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But it was what it was. It was, it was a lighthearted kind of diversion from the main story. He might have, he could have played a bigger part in this main Spider-Verse story. He ended up not doing that. I mean, that is what it is. I'm happy enough that he was basically the main character of the movie, which took this concept and kind of like just simplified it to the point where it was accessible to,
it was one of those movies where I was so surprised at how well it was done when I was watching it.
Me too, man.
It surpassed expectations.
I saw that. I ended up seeing, I saw that movie in the theater more than once. I know that. I took my niece to see it. My niece sees a lot of superhero movies with me from time to time. She's my, comic book movie going partner when I see her. She lives in Florida. I live in New York. I don't see her that often, but when we do, we try to, make up for lost time.
Yeah.
And we went to see that movie, and she knows what a huge Spider-Man fan I am. And the part at the end, the part where, Miles finally, puts on the costume and, What's Up Danger is playing in the background. And I'm, sitting in my chair, and I'm, 8 years old again. And my niece is looking at me like, yeah, I understand. I get it. It hits an emotional chord with that. If nothing else, this story definitely set the groundwork for a lot of that. A lot of these characters that got introduced in Edge of Spider-Verse, got to have their time to shine. Penny Parker got her, and Spider-Man Noir, who I still imagine Nick Cage's voice when I read his parts.
Oh, yes. And
of course, Gwen Stacy, who's another character who I think got a lot of pop culture cred through that movie, which may not have happened if she hadn't resonated so strongly through the comic, through Edge of Spider-Verse #2. That was like a lightning in a bottle type of moment. If you weren't reading comics at that particular time, it's hard to describe, especially in this day and age where it's hard to get people excited about anything related to comic books in specific until it's adapted for something else, until something gets adapted for TV or for a movie or for an animated show or for a mini series. It's hard to get people excited about something just in comic book form. And, Spider-Gwen really hit that in a way that hadn't been hit in a while. It was probably since Miles Morales, made his, debuted, a couple of years earlier than that. Mm-hmm. And then the movie just pushed it, forward. I had a nice gloat about that movie when Into the Spider-Verse won an Oscar, because it did win an Oscar for Best Animated Feature, and it, there was no contest with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, deserve it so.
But I remember all the little pocket arguments that I used to have on Facebook years earlier about how, Miles Morales is Flash in the Pan character. He'll be gone in another couple of months, if not another couple of years, if not a couple of months. He's a pandering character. He's capitalizing on a trend. He's this, he's that. He'll be gone in 5 years. Fast forward to 10 years after he debuts, and he's the main character.
That's right.
Wins an Oscar.
That's
and I'm
right.
like,
suck it.
That's something, man.
So anything left unsaid on Spider-Verse?
If we're talking final thoughts, if we're talking about what would be a good final thought for this, just the mark of a good story, at least a good story feature, a good superhero story, a good hero story of any kind, is usually, I think, this is me talking as, somebody that writes less than I should, but more than most. Mm-hmm. But a good hero story should leave the hero at the end of the story in a better place than where they started from. And I think that's true. And when you have a story like Spider-Verse, where there's dozens and dozens of different heroes, because each one of these spider characters is a hero of their own universe. Some of them live, some of them die. Even when they die, they go down swinging. Some deaths are more grand and more dignified and more in-depth than others. But all of them die trying to stand for something, trying to protect the greater good, or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And then, we got Peter Parker, who realizes at the end that he can be a leader, and he can be, he can make a difference on a much grander scale than he ever thought possible. And yet, and at the same time, the epilogue for Spider-Verse is him, smacking down a purse snatcher, and that's how that story ends. And it's funny, like, the person he returns the lady he returns to is thankful, and he thanks him, and he's like, wait a minute, am I still in the same universe? He's actually grateful.
He's not used to it. Yeah.
That's growth. Mayday Parker learning that, she can take that, she can take the moral high ground, and she can temper her own, kind of thirst for anger and revenge, and choose to do the right thing at the end. That's growth. She starts out in a certain place and ends up in a better place than when she started. Mm-hmm. Even some of the lesser utilized characters in this story, we got Gwen Stacy and Miles Morales, who are not used as much as they could have been, who are used much more in the movie, obviously. But they still have their arc where it's like, they are capable of more than they thought they were. That seems to be the theme of this. Even, villainous pieces of crap like, Octavius, who have nothing but ill intentions for everybody, kind of realizes that they can be better than they thought they could be. Mm-hmm. We find out Ock has kind of a rocky road to that conclusion, if you follow all of Superior Spider-Man. We find out his road to that realization is not as easy as some of the other spider characters from some of the other universes, but eventually he kind of gets there in his own way. Like I said, this arc in general, this whole story, it's not what it could have been. I'm sure a lot of editorial played a hand in that, and a lot of marketing and it played a hand in that. Mm-hmm. But there's a good story here, at the heart of what's going on, and that's just, becoming better than you thought you could be. Yeah. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like all of these other spider men, women, monkeys, pigs, etc. I think there's either an alligator or a dinosaur in there somewhere.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Yeah. I distinctly remember something like that. But anyway, all of these characters kind of, for the sake of the greater good, become better than they thought they could be. That's pretty good. That's a good arc in any kind of heroic story.
For sure.
We see it a lot. It's just, sometimes it's done better than other times. In this case, it's kind of hit or miss depending on the character we're talking about. But, and, you know, like I already said, some of the tie-ins and some of the, you know, side stories and side adventures probably could have been factored in a little bit more importantly in the main story. Mm-hmm. But I'll say this as somebody who, when I first read Spider-Verse, I only read the main 6-part arc. It felt disjointed, it felt incomplete, it felt rushed. This time I read everything. I read the entire checklist from start to finish. Mm-hmm. It was a journey. But I think it helped. I think it gave a lot more context to the main 6-part story.
That's right.
It felt more important. It felt more vital. It felt, you know, the characters that were involved felt more involved. You know, I'm not sure I'd recommend everybody read like all 22 disparate parts, and not counting all the epilogues and all of the fallout and stuff like that. You know, it's a tall order for anybody, even for people that are used to reading that many, you know, that you know, comic book stories that are that big.
Yeah.
But it definitely helps. We see a lot of the depth and a lot of the character development that kind of gets alluded to in the main 6-part story gets kind of greatly expanded upon.
Yeah.
In all the you know, the surrounding material, I guess you call it.
Yeah.
So it's where, if you're into that sort of thing, if you're really reading, you know, any story in particular, not just comics, but any story in particular, if you're really reading for the characters, if you really want to get as deep as possible, if you want to get into deep character development and, you know, motivation and all that good stuff, it's worth it to read the tie-ins. It's worth it to read the side stories. It's worth it to really kind of, you know, immerse yourself in that. It makes it a little bit richer. It makes what happens to everybody and where they ultimately end up. And like I said, this is a story that one of the main themes seems to be, you know, all of these heroes finding it in themselves to become greater than how they started out.
Yeah.
If you don't catch the journey that leads to that, it doesn't hit
exactly.
It doesn't hit as hard.
Just like we said, specifically with Scarlet Spiders, there's a lot of weight.
Yeah. If nothing else, if anybody wants to read Spider-Verse, read Scarlet Spiders along with it.
Yes.
Where it's appropriate to do so, like at the points where they kind of tie it back in. Read that at the very least, because that needs to be included.
I agree.
The whole arc with Kane and with Ben Reilly and with 1610 with Jessica Drew. That's, if I had to call any other like side material indispensable to this story, that would be it.
That's it.
Check that out.
This all starts, I'm like, Ben, we got to talk about Spider-Verse. And Ben sends me a message and he says, I hate to do this to you, but you might want to check out some of the tie-ins. So I'm like, tie-ins. Okay, well, let's see what we got on tap here. Oh, crap. It's 20 issues.
Yeah, it is.
Now, if anybody's been a long-time listener to the Source Material Comics podcast, Ben and myself, and I think Jason Teasley, got together and talked about Maximum Carnage way back in the day. So that was, I think still at that point, up till now, was the longest series that I had the chance to cover on Source Material. Counting these whole 22 issues, which is the main 20-part storyline and the 2 epilogues, that will now own easily the most issues covered in our discussion on Source Material here. So that being said, I see the 20 issues and I'm immediately like, I immediately start to mutter curses as to, I'm going to have to read these and it's going to be a very long and very tedious process.
Jesse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember when we thought 14 issues was the tall order?
Yeah, and
do
now
you remember that?
22.
Yeah,
behind the curtain. Here's what I do: I read the issue, I put notes together. That's what I did, and I knew that doing 22 issues was going to be very tough. I think we did Maximum Carnage probably in 2015 or 2016, something like that. So we're 5 years outside of that. I've got a little bit more podcasting under my belt. I've noted some issues and know how to do a conversation about them. So I'm like, I can do this. And even though it was a daunting task, I enjoyed every little bit of it, because even though there were some parts throughout the story where I was like, okay, well, maybe that doesn't matter so much. Why are we spending? At no point where I was like wanting to put an issue down and immediately stop it. I was able to get through all 20 some issues really within 2 days. And that's, you talked about people who are used to reading comics and big story arcs like that. I guess I'm used to doing that, but I've never sat down and read 22 issues in a row. I don't think I've ever done that in my life. Like in 2 days? No, never done it.
Well, I mentioned this again. We talked about I mentioned this, I think, before we started recording. But, I basically spent my whole day at my day job today reading most of the second half of this whole Spider-Verse checklist.
Yeah.
I did very little else at my job. Luckily, it was a slow day. Otherwise, I'd have been in big trouble today. I mentioned, like, somebody could have come in and robbed the place and I wouldn't have noticed. I was just too busy reading.
You had your nose in the book. I understand. But yeah, I mean, overall for myself, I enjoyed the story. I know I mentioned this at the beginning. It checks boxes for me. We have alternate realities going on. We got all these Spider-Men, Spider-Woman, Spider-People coming together, trying to face off with this big threat. So I felt very much at home in the story itself. I loved the art. I love the art of the main book. There was some specific stuff that happens in other books where they are using some of the art style of like daily newspaper. I loved how a lot of the creative teams throughout these books were able to kind of mesh those things together. Even in the Spider-Verse itself, I mean, we got 67 Spider-Man who joins the team, and they draw him like 67 Spider-Man on the
looking at it right now.
Yeah,
looking at it right now.
It's beautiful. So it's that really speaks to me. So I was so excited to get in here and talk about it and actually get a chance to read it. And I'm glad I did. And Benjamin, of course, I'm glad to have you along on the ride with me to talk about Spider-Verse. And I want to close this out by asking you, I mean, again, the trailer just dropped in real time for us a couple days ago for the new Spider-Man movie, which is called No Way Home, if I remember correctly. Is that right? No Way Home?
Yep, No Way Home.
No Way Home. So I know that I'm excited because just from seeing one person, they didn't even have to reveal like all the villains. They just showed one full villain and some allusions to the others. But I'm excited for the movie. Tell me what your thoughts are on No Way Home.
My immediate thought when I first saw it was it's gonna be a long next 4 months.
Sit here and wait.
So this is a message specifically to future me. I hope it was worth it. I hope it was even more awesome than what it looked like from that trailer at the end of August. We saw some very interesting things. Also, I will mention we talked about it a little bit earlier. I hope that was when we were still recording. You have to understand the balls that I think it's going to take to even slightly adapt One More Day into movie form. I certainly hope. Listen, I was not a huge fan of Civil War as a comic either. I think that comic was not great, especially the way it ended. Mm-hmm. They adapted it into a pretty damn good movie. Mm-hmm. They took what worked about that and used it, and then kind of jettisoned what didn't work about it. I'm hoping they do that. If they have any thought, if it seems as much as what it looks like from the trailer that they're adapting One More Day, I hope they take what worked about that and kind of do away with everything else. This is going to be a lot of fan service. I hope it's still wrapped up in a pretty good story. It seems like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is kind of all in on the concept of a multiverse as they're presenting it. Mm-hmm. We've seen that if anybody's watched like Loki on Disney Plus, they're pretty all in on the concept of a multiverse, which kind of makes sense because I guess the question of a lot of people posed the question when Avengers Endgame ended. The question was, where do you go from Thanos? Where do you go from a threat to, something that threatens threatens to destroy the entire universe. And I guess Marvel's answer to that was, well, we present a threat to every universe.
Yeah.
You know what? I applaud the boldness of that, and I applaud the guts that it takes to follow through with, you know, something that big, and to take what was an unprecedented sort of thing in movies in general with, you know, how they executed, you know, Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
And raise the stakes on that.
Mm-hmm.
This seems to be the beginning. There's going to be some far-reaching implications, I think, from this, you know, the Spider-Man movie. I'm hoping for a couple of surprises. They've alluded to a couple. I'm hoping. It's very hard to keep a secret in 2021, man.
Oh, no kidding, dude.
It's very hard to keep a secret. So you know what? I'll be happy for any secret, any surprise. If I'm surprised in any way by this movie, I'll call that a win.
Yes, sir.
You know, because it's just so hard to keep anything under wraps right now. Like, you know, there's cameras everywhere. There's social media everywhere. Everybody's got a camera and a computer in their pocket. It's very hard to really surprise anybody anymore with entertainment, with pop culture. So I'm kind of looking forward to being surprised is kind of the last thing I'll say about that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the multiverse and that being a concept, I cannot express to the listeners how just in awe that I am that we have a series on the Disney Plus channel right now for What If. It just boggles my 12-year-old mind that the What If comics that I was reading would even translate to something that would go onto the small screen. Like, I never thought I'd even see it. I never thought I'd see the day. And for the past 3 weeks, me and my daughter have sat down and watched the What If series on Disney Plus, and can't be more thrilled with the fact that I get that opportunity to do that. So when it comes to Spider-Man No Way Home, trust me, the Radulich and Broadcasting Network chat blew up as soon as the trailer hit. I'd never had a chance to watch it up until I think it was yesterday in the afternoon. And the only reason I did was because my daughter says, "Dad, let's watch the trailer. I've already watched it. Have you seen it?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't." She's like, "Let's watch it together." It's great.
There was like the ridiculously low res, like, you know, video of somebody else's video trailer that I refuse to watch because I'm like, I'm not watching this postage stamp size trailer. Like, that's just no way to watch something like this. Then I found out Marvel actually released it. Okay, fine.
Yeah, I saw the grainy thumbnail and I was like,
I didn't even bother.
Nope.
Looks like,
nope.
nah.
So yeah, my daughter, it's great to my daughter's a big Tom Holland fan. She loves I won't belabor the point, but taking her to go watch Infinity War and watching her have a breakdown in the theater and then all the way home because Tom Holland Spider-Man died. I got to say that my heart felt a little bit of glee when the fact that I understood she was that emotional over a comic book movie.
If you give them a reason to care, I don't care what age, what generation, whatever. You give them a reason to care, you give them a reason to be emotionally invested, and they will react.
Yeah,
we will all react.
Exactly. So anyway, I'm excited. I mean, dude, we just talked about Spider-Verse and all the boxes it checked for me. Now just go ahead and take those boxes and check them over there for the movie No Way Home, because we can see in that trailer Dr. Octopus from not Amazing Spider-Man 2. That's the wrong Spider-Man. From Spider-Man 2.
Although depending on what rumors you believe and what names you've heard being thrown around,
yep,
Amazing Spider-Man universe may not be completely forgotten.
That's right.
In all this.
That is right. So yeah, I can't wait to see it, man. I'm really excited. I know that most likely that will be a movie. I don't go to the theaters very often, and this is of course, within the last year, I think the only theater I went to was a very, very remote showing of Back to the Future last year. And that was it. Of course, but that was it. And so we haven't seen anything in the theaters since then, and I guarantee you Spider-Man will be on the list. So, yeah, man. Well, Benjamin, I cannot thank you enough for coming on here. We've spent 3.5 hours recording, which is
we did it. I can't believe we did it. I can't believe we pulled it off.
We did it, man. So let's go ahead and we will get into plugs. So. Hey, it's plug time, and you all know what that means. This would be a good time to plug the sponsor of the W2M network, and that is Grammarly. For you, the listeners of Source Material, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free. Benjamin J. Colon, I know you've been frequenting cons here. At least you've been to a couple that I've seen that you've shared on Facebook. People probably want to find out where they can get some of your stuff, maybe commissions, whatever. What do you got going on with your stuff there? What would you like to plug?
Yeah, I just about, I guess it's a week and a half now. I did MegaCon in Orlando, Florida. It was my first con in 2 years for obvious reasons. It was, it was a good time. Made a little bit of money, sold a couple of comics, sold some artwork, met some people, some new people, some old people. Got to meet some Radulich and Broadcasting Network friends. I got to meet Mark Radulich and his wonderful family, and that was an awesome experience. And I got to give them a copy, or not a copy actually, I got to give them the original artwork to one of the Long Road to Ruin title cards.
Awesome.
That I did for them, which, I told them, I know they'll treat it right. And it'll be seen a lot more on the wall in their home than it would be in my portfolio, which is usually stuck in a drawer somewhere. So that was great. I'm glad I got to meet Mark and his family, who were very wonderful. I got to meet Alexis Henya, who was my booth neighbor. She was literally like about 50 feet away from me all weekend. Cool. We got to hang out a little bit. That was pretty cool. I got to also spend some time with members of my family who come out and help me with my booth. I say now that they're all over 18 and legal adults. I know I used to call them my child labor. Now they're my young adult labor.
I gotta go get something to eat. Watch the booth.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, it's more like, I gotta go to the bathroom. Watch the booth. But if any of them are listening, I love each and every one of you, and I'm so thankful that you guys have indulged your uncle's insane pursuits in exhibiting at conventions, and I hope you guys all had a good time. Aside from that, my con schedule is kind of up in the air. I want to do East Coast Comic Con whenever they come back, but they have not announced the new date yet. I will probably do MegaCon 2022 there at the end of May next year. Everything got moved to August this year. Everything's moving back to the spring next year, once again for obvious reasons. Aside from that, if you guys want to find me online, it's a little bit easier than it used to be. See, I used to have to plug all kinds of different things. Now, I kind of streamlined it. I simplified it. I am Epic Benjamin J, EPICBENJAMINJ. On all the things. That includes Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. I kind of went insane with the Twitch channel and the live painting and live drawing over the past couple of months. What I expected to be kind of a 2-week hiatus in May actually turned into a whole last summer vacation, and I haven't streamed since the end of May on Twitch, but I'm hoping to get back to that. I started what I'm hoping to be a series. I'm working on a Spider-Man versus the Sinister Six series of paintings.
Nice.
Spider-Man versus Electro, the one that I did while I was at MegaCon in Orlando, is on my Instagram page. I'm going to do one for the other 5 members of the Sinister Six, and I'm going to have prints made of those as an entire series that I hope to sell at future shows. I'm looking into horror conventions because I did a whole series of new horror creatures and monsters. We got Chiller Convention right, in the New York, New Jersey tri-state area that I'm thinking about getting involved in. Everything is kind of up in the air, but I feel like things are coming back down to earth a little bit more than they seem to be at the beginning of this year.
That's good.
The most important thing is I'm working on my my new comic book series. It's called Heroes One and All. I would like very much to have it finished to be released next year. That's not a guarantee, but it's a goal, and I certainly hope I will be able to meet that goal. But, keep following me on social medias, and you'll be able to find that out for sure, whether or not I've succeeded in that. I hope not to disappoint any of you.
All right. Well, you can follow me at Stiznarchy on Twitter. We do all sorts of different shows here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. So I know that myself, I'm involved in a show called The Unspoken Issues. Well, it's called Unspoken Issues. It's a 90s comic-centric podcast. And usually it's me and Chris Armstrong, or me hanging out with Dean Compton and Derry Waite. Just recently, and you can go back in the archives. I know this is a good ways out from when we're recording this, but we just finished and it uploaded our second episode on Transformers Generation 2 today. We covered all 12 issues of that and 6 episodes apiece each episode, and 2 episodes. But anyway, a lot of fun. I learned a lot about Transformers. I'm about one of the biggest casual Transformers guys. I know the big players, but getting on that podcast with Dean and Derry, I learned a lot. And Transformers Generation 2 was definitely a step outside of the comfort zone that I'm used to with Transformers, and that was okay. You could check that out. Check out the Source Material Comics archive as well. But shout out to the Radulich and Broadcasting Network as always, and of course the W2M Network for hosting the podcast. And I think that will bring this discussion of Spider-Verse to a close. That's Benjamin J. Clone. I am Jesse Starcher. This has been the Source Material Comics podcast. We will catch you next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.